Hello and welcome to Homer for Friday, September 5th. Today we'll be reading from lines 13 down to 33 in Book 12 of the Iliad, in which we continue to consider the god's ability to build and the god's ability to destroy. Thank you so much for being here with me today, and I hope you enjoy this substantial passage. But when all the bravest of the Trojans had died, and many of the Argives, some were slain and some were left, and the city of Priam was sacked in the 10th year, and the Argives have gone back in their ships to their dear native land, then verily did Poseidon and Apollo take counsel to sweep away the wall, bringing against it the might of all the rivers that flow forth from the mountains of Ida to the sea, Rhesus, Haptoporus, and Caresus, and Rhodios, and Granicus, and Aesopus, and goodly Scamander, and sea moist by the banks whereof many shields of bull's hide and many helms fell in the dust, and the race of men half divine. Of all these did Phoebus Apollo turn the mouths together, and for 9 days' space he drave their flood against the wall. And Zeus reigned ever continually, that the sooner he might whelm the wall in the salt sea. And the shaker of earth, bearing his trident in his hands, was himself the leader, and swept forth upon the waves all the foundations of beams and stones that the Achaeans had laid with toil, and made all smooth along the strong stream of the Hellespont, and again covered the great beach with sand when he had swept away the wall. And the rivers he turned back to flow in the channel, where aforetime they had been wont to pour their fair streams of water. Great. That's a lot, but it's really good. Let's do it in the Greek. Autere pe katemen troon tanon hossi aristoi. Holloi dargeioi hoi mendamen hoi deliponto. Perthetote priamoi jopolis decatoi en iautoi. Argeioi den nausipilenes patride besan. De tote metion te posse dauon kai apollon. Te cosamal duonai potomon menose sagagontes. Hossoi abidaion oreon ala de proreusi. Chresos te taporoste caresos te rodioste. Grenikos te kai septos dios te scamandros. Scamandros. Kai simoes otipole boagrie kai tu falleiai. Cappesonen conies kai miteon genosandron. Ton panton homoses tomadetra cafoebos apollon. Enne mardes tecos hieron hue darasdaus. Suoneca sofra catassona liplo ad hece atee. Autos den nosigaios con ceres triainan. Hege dec darapanta temelia cumasi pempe. Fitron kai lauon te tesan mogeon te secaioi. Lea da poie sen paragarro en hellesponton. Altis de iona megalem samatois calupse. Te cosamal duonas potemus tetrepsenestai. Kai chrone per prosenien caliron hudor. Amazing. So, first of all, I apologize. It's been like a few days of, I had a big exam for school, and I've been kind of sick. Just bad mix in between there. I think of, when Plato talks about the state, right, he talks about the transition between the different polities in a state of democracy, temarchy, oligarchy, tyranny, and I think there's one more, aristocracy, right? These structures, there's always a nosema, that goes between them. And that nosema is like an illness, right? And an illness breaks. So you sweat when an illness breaks, right? It's actually a good thing when you have the flu to be like sweating, right? It's interesting that the geography of the Iliad is described sort of like in this way, with water flowing in and out, right? So Zeus makes it rain a lot, right? And of course it's the wall is going down into the salt sea, right? it's raining very hard. And I think most notably, what I find really, really interesting about this passage is that the rivers turn back, right? So the rivers are turned back to flow in the channel, where aforetime they had been wont to pour their fair streams of water. I guess that's after they have been, turned in order to, demolish the wall, right? Right? And I think it's interesting how the adjective for the water that's flowing, this flowing water, is kaliron, right? Not just because, it's describing a river in like beautiful terms, but because I think it sort of describes, for Plato, for instance, the beautiful city is the Kallipolis, right? Sort of like, mentioned in like a sort of like joking manner, right? But like, why is, the river water going the right way, the beautiful water, and going the other way, which is not capable of, which is capable of destroying the wall, not the beautiful way? Maybe it's because the triumph of, man, these individuals who are fighting, it's an interesting like leap forward. We're not just leaping forward past, like some action in the Iliad, as often the Homeric poet does. We're leaping past all like the history of the entire conflict. Once everybody is gone, right, the land will return to what it previously was. So if you're into landscaping, right, if you're into like, learning about the environment, right, this is a huge environmental passage because it talks about the eventuality of the sort of return to form and how that returned form is the kaliron, right, of the water, right? Just as, Zeus's, choice of when to make it rain, and Poseidon's, choice to, make the rivers, swell, right? It's all it's all so much more cosmologically significant and placed than the little bits and pieces of stories that we're hearing, right? Which we do think about as little bits and pieces of stories of people, tossing sticks and stones, literally, right? Of the heroic stories of the Iliad. And the only thing that gives them purchase is the gods' wont to sort of allow this passage to take place. This passage being the entire poem, which, obviously they could have flooded the rivers at any time, is the point of the passage. So I just think that's very interesting. And as we get into the deliberation and the action of Book 12, I think it's nice that Homer gives us this sort of bird's eye view of like how, to physically interact with the Iliadic landscape, following off of last time's reading. With that, I am happy that we're in it. Big passage today, but very good. But that's all I have for you today. These reflections on the landscape. I hope you enjoyed these 20 lines of Homer, 20 lines or so. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And I look forward to sharing more Homer with you tomorrow. Thank you so much for being here, and have a great day. Bye.